Hello, I'm Gage
And I'm Winston, the world's fastest turtle.
and this is the Investigation Station. Today, we have the question, how do we move? From Isaac. To answer this question, we need to talk about what our bodies are made of and how they work. To help us visualize these systems in our bodies, I'm going to walk you through how to make 3 specialized puppets. And do feel free to follow along at home. The first of the puppets we'll make today is a model of how our arms work. To make this puppet, all you need is a drinking straw, preferably one that does not bend, some string or fishing line, a pair of scissors, and something to poke a hole through your straw. You can use a pen, I'll be using a needle, but make sure you ask an adult for help making these holes. Our first step is to cut a small slit in the center of our drinking straw. It should look like a small triangle. After that, we will need to poke 4 tiny holes into the ends of the straw, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. I'll be using the sewing pin again, but make sure to ask an adult for help. Next is the hardest part. We need to take our string and carefully pull it through the hole at the top. Then tie a knot in the rope and string it through the bottom. Once we're done with that, we'll need to do the same thing, but at this time, starting at the bottom and pulling through to the top. Now that we have the small puppet made, we'll bring out the giant version so you can see it in action a little bit better.
Hey, Gage, how come neither of these puppets really look that much like an arm?
That's a good question. These puppets aren't really supposed to look like an arm as much as they're supposed to act like an arm. Let me explain. Under our skin, we have a series of tendons and muscles and ligaments, which are what make us able to move. When you bend your arm, for example, your brain sends a signal to this group of muscles in your arm to pull together really tight, and that's what makes our arm bend in. Now, muscles really only have 2 settings, pull real tight and relax. So we have a separate muscle group that pulls on the opposite direction to make us unbend our arms. So, based on my description of how our real arms work, how do you think that our puppet arm here will work?
Oh, maybe pulling on that string is like making the muscles in our arms get really tight. Like you said they do when our arms bend.
Alright, that's a good guess. Let's check. Well, looks like you were right there, Winston.
Okay, now since opening and closing muscles are different, we have to pull the other string for it to open back up again.
Wow, you've got this whole thing figured out now, don't ya?
Hey, if bending and unbending are different muscles, which one's stronger?
Well, in people, they're usually about the same, since most exercises that work out one muscle group will also work out the opposite. But you know your cousin, Niles the alligator?
Yeah?
Well, like most alligators, and crocodiles for that matter, Niles has a very strong bite, so when he chomps down, it really hurts. But the muscles that make his mouth close are way stronger than the muscles that open it back up. That's why there are people who can wrestle alligators, even though it's still pretty dangerous. Once their mouths are closed, some people's arms are stronger than the muscles that pull the jaw open.
Oh, wow!
All right, are you ready to make the second puppet?
Yeah, let's go!
Alright, for this puppet, we're going to use the same string, straw, and scissors that we used before. But we're also going to add a sheet of craft foam, tape, and a marker. If you don't have a sheet of craft foam, you can use a sheet of paper, but keep in mind that foam will work just a smidge better. Now, the first thing we need to do is trace our hand onto our foam. Make sure that you spread out your fingers as much as you can when you trace it out. Next, we need to take our straws and cut them so we can fit 3 on each finger, except the thumb, which only needs 2, with a small gap in between them. Next, we'll take one more straw and we'll cut it so it stretches from the end of each finger with that same small gap once again down toward the wrist. Now, go ahead and tape each of these straws down. Lastly, we just need to tie a string from the top of the fingers and pull it all the way through to the bottom of the wrist. After we get all the strings through the straws, our hand puppet will be complete. Alright, as you can probably guess, this puppet is meant to show us how our hands move.
So when we pull the string, the finger will bend, right?
That's right.
Wait, but when we move our fingers, we don't pull back down there, do we?
They kind of do. Watch here. When we look at my arm here, you can see that the movement in your fingers originates way further back in our arms than in our actual fingers. In fact, if you turn your arm like this, you can see that the muscles in your forearm are pulling and loosening when we move our fingers, just like how our puppet has the strings coming off at the end. Now, when we pull these strings, we can see the hand move in a pretty similar way to how our actual hands move.
Wow, okay. You said we had 3 puppets to show, right? What's the last one like?
Okay, last but not least, we have our model of a lung. Now for this last puppet, all we need are scissors, tape, an empty bottle, and 2 balloons. The first thing we need to do is to cut the bottle in half. It doesn't have to be perfect, just a little bit smaller. Next, we need to take 1 balloon and put it inside the water bottle so the lip of the balloon wraps around the top of the bottle. Next, we need to tie the other balloon shut and cut it in half. Then we'll stretch it over the bottom of the bottle so you'll be able to pull on the knot. Lastly, you have to tape it in place. And that's our lung. Alright, Now that we have this lung finished, do you have a guess on how it might work and what the different parts might represent?
Well, whenever we've pulled something in the past, it's been like a muscle. So maybe we need to pull the muscle on the bottom to make the lung work.
That's a pretty good guess. Now let's take a look.
Oh wow, I was right! But how does it work though?
Okay, so the balloon in the middle is like our lungs, and much like our real lungs, we can't move them directly, the same way we can move our arms or our hands. So when we need to breathe, we actually move the muscles around it, specifically the diaphragm. This forces the lungs to move in a way that sucks in air as a response.
But they're not touching. How does the lung move if it's not touching the diaphragm?
Well, is air made of something or nothing?
Something?
That's right. And because air is something, it takes up space. So when we move the diaphragm, the air still wants to take up the same amount of space. And the only way to do that is for the lungs to get bigger. Does that make more sense?
I think so.
That's all right. Sometimes that's all you need. Okay, hopefully these puppets helped us learn just a little bit more about the ways we move.
Hey Gage, if we move by pulling and constricting muscles, why don't we feel the muscles moving themselves?
That's an interesting question. We know that we spend the first few years of our life just figuring out how to move our bodies. But after that, we're not fully sure why we don't think of these motions in terms of the smaller details.
So that means...
That's right. You can be the one who figures it out. That's all the time we have for this week. So until next time,
remember that repetition and discussion are both important parts of the learning process. So feel free to rewatch this episode or talk to somebody else about what you learned here today.
and stay curious.